All right, we watched the CIA agent. Now let's watch what a KGB agent says about former KGB agent. I don't. I think he's not a KGB or FSB agent anymore. Says about language learning, and I'm not talking about Lex Fridman, by the way. He probably is as well, but um, I'm talking about the this guy, Jack Barsky, or Barsky, whatever his real name is.
I started studying English. So I started back from scratch. They paid for a tutor, and I went from like English 101. And then I went through that in a couple of months, and then I got another guy with whom I expanded this. We had
For those of you who don't know, I read this guy's book a year ago. He's a former East German. I mean, there's no East Germany anymore, but he's an East German who got recruited by the KGB, so his Russia had to be excellent already, and then trained to be a spy, undercover spy in the U.S., pretending to be an American. This is the difference between the supposed CIA guy who probably just got a job in a Spanish in a Spanish. So I'm so used to saying Spanish embassy now. In the American embassy somewhere, pretended to work there. So just it's obviously there are obviously very different levels of just go there working for the government and then pretending to work for the government and send some emails back home uh, from the office, or you break into like you move undercover into the country with a fake identity, pretending to be a local. It's very, very different. So yeah, this guy eventually got caught as well, but he's doing well now. So let's see. I mean, his obviously English is not my native language. His English sounds excellent. I don't know if he sounds fully native.
conversations rather than working from a textbook, and I worked like a maniac. I threw myself into the
I wouldn't be able to tell he's not a native speaker, but again, I'm not a native speaker myself. But he's it's excellent. But maybe a native speaker can. I mean, he lived there for years, right? So maybe it took him a long time to catch him. So definitely he must have fooled a lot of people.
study of English like you wouldn't believe. And my inspiration came from Vladimir Lenin. I had read somewhere in a book that when Lenin was in exile, he studied German, and he learned 100 German words every day.
Okay. Now, all those people in the comment section, every time I talk about learning lots of words every day with associations, if Vladimir Lenin, of all people, could do this 100 plus years ago with the technology from back then, I hope none of you complaining about this learning so many words a day is being impossible and all that. I hope none of you is a communist. I'm certainly not. No, I'm not a communist. Um, again, like people would learning hundreds of words a day, like before the internet. This is what you can do when you're hard working.
New German words. So I started reading newspapers, and every word that I didn't know, I wrote down on an index card, German, English, and I piled them up. And so I really learned 100 new English words every day. I know this because I counted them, and I had a system how to do this. So you take your index card, and you have 5 categories. It's a really good way to learn rote by rote. So you got category 1, that's the new ones, and you got category 5. So you start with 5. 5 you already had right 4 times. If you have it right again, it goes into the archive.
Oh,
You know what this sounds like? Flashcards. Exactly what you do with Anki. Now, is this efficient? It's effective, but and he didn't say exactly how the words were written, but I would have an example sentence next to each word. It makes it much easier to remember, and also use associations the first time. So you have to review them much less often, much fewer times, so that to remember them. First associations, then sentences, well, words with an example sentence next to them. But this is basically it. Yeah, it's spaced repetition.
You like long-term cold archive, yeah.
4, if you get it right, it goes to 5. If you get it wrong, it gets relegated to 3. So you go through this, and occasionally I would throw the archive things back into 1. So I really acquired a phenomenal vocabulary. When I was done with my English, my vocabulary was significantly higher than the average American because I didn't discriminate. Whatever word I didn't know, I learned, which is not necessarily the best way because English has a lot of synonyms, right?
Yeah.
And
It's not the best way. It's better than what most people do, but it's not the most efficient use of your time. Although it is effective. If you just do spaced repetition with thousands of words, you will eventually learn. Again, if you use associations first and example sentences, and you also create audio files, which he couldn't do back then, but nowadays we use TTS software to create audio files with all those words and sentences and review it all in context. Basically, the same concept, but much more efficiently. Yeah, you can do it.
and one synonym is usually the preferable one. And I, when I first interacted with people, I very often used the one that wasn't as good. And people have found that I have an interesting way of talking. They didn't know what that meant, but
Yeah, so it builds a good foundation for language. It's getting a large vocabulary.
Yes.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, this is why you should be listening to a lot of audio material by native speakers for native speakers, podcasts and so on, conversation, so that all the vocab that you're learning, thousands and thousands of words that you're learning, will be really useful for you to understand the audio content. But the audio content is where you will naturally learn which of those words are actually useful and common, and which ones sound weird, and which it'll help you put everything into context.
There's something I do which is called spaced repetition, which is a programmatic way of doing this kind of system that you've developed yourself, which is if you successfully remember a thing, it's going to be a longer time before it brings it up to you again.
Yeah.
Now, that requires a computer to keep track of the information. If you have cars, that's a really interesting pile system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You upgrade it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe I wouldn't go to the archive and go to pile 1 right away. Maybe I would go to pile.
This is where Anki is good because you don't put them in a somewhere where you never see them again unless you put them back into the pile. Review them in for days, and then you review them in a day or 4 days or 7 days, depending on how well you know them. And after 7 days you still know them well, you review them in a month, and then in 6 months, and so that's how it works. So the space keeps getting bigger, but also just listen to the language. The important ones, you get enough listening, you'll just review them in context.
5 perhaps is probably the right place to put it because you have to go through that full step again. But that is a really powerful way to learn definitely language, but also facts. Like people that go to medical school,
disconnected facts.
Yeah,
and you pretty much when you're done, you know what you know.
Yeah,
you don't have
then again to use it to integrate it into the music of language. That's more difficult. That's what you're talking
exactly
about.
Right. Exactly right.
There's a charm.
That's why, again, listening, native level content, podcasts and radio. What shows if you want? Podcasts and radio are much more time efficient. That's why you integrate them into the music of the language.
Maybe it's not good for spycraft, but there's a charm to this kind of to having an accent and using words incorrectly but confidently. Because language isn't a simple formula. Language is the play of words. So actually using the incorrect synonym, if instead of saying I'm cold, saying I'm chilled or something, like using offbeat words can actually be part of the charm. So it's interesting if you can learn how to use that correctly. Because I know a bunch of people with a Russian accent, and I feel like they get away with saying a lot of ridiculous shit because they're able to sort of leverage the charm of the non sequiturs.
By the way, just one thing. You talked about using a computer. When I had my first personal computer, I actually wrote a program that does that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. In general, good advice. Spaced repetition, deliberate practice. Again, quite outdated, but if you do it with modern technology, you incorporate associations and for the first round of memorization, and also audio files. You do lots of reviewing in context. This works really well. You can learn thousands of words in a matter of months, weeks, if you do it right. yeah, this guy definitely much better advice than the CIA guy, which is just passport bro talking about being a spy or something.